Very frustrating, isn't it? Apparently I've got no sound. So you can see me but not hear me. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Chris? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
And you can see me?
Yes.
Hallelujah, we're back on. Right. Now, I don't know what happened then. I got a message on my screen. It says your computer needs to restart. It's never done that ever before. So it does make you wonder if something spooky is going on. Now, what I've just been asked is how do we diagnose the condition? Right. Now, the condition is caused by this virus, this COVID-19 virus. So here we have the virus, and it's got lots of protein bits sticking out the surface of it like that, and that gives it the appearance of a crown, like this. So it looks a bit like that with these proteins on the top. That's the virus itself. Now, when the virus gets into the body recognizes the virus as being foreign. So the body recognises the virus as being foreign. That's good. Some of you have come back. That's good. Come back. That's good. You're coming back. Now, anything that the body recognises as being foreign, we call that an antigen. That is an antigen. The body recognises it as being foreign. An antigen is short for antibody generating molecule. Because what an antigen will do is it will stimulate the body to make an antibody. So an antigen will stimulate your body to make an antibody. That's what normally happens. This antibody is an immune protein called an immunoglobulin. And this will combat the viral infection. Now, in this virus, there's a single strand of RNA like that. Now, if you tested for HIV, we test for this. We've learned how to test for the antibody. So you talk about someone being HIV antibody positive or antibody negative. But we haven't got an antibody test for this virus yet. Now, this virus is called SARS, Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome virus. Coronavirus 2, that's the official name of this virus. So the antigen is SARS-coronavirus-2, and that's what causes the disease, the COVID-19 disease. So we can't test for this at the moment, although people all around the world are working on that. So what we actually test for is the presence of the RNA strand by a test called PCR, and that stands for polymerase chain reaction. And what that does is it takes one strand of RNA from the virus and multiplies it up into lots of strands of RNA. So we end up with lots of strands of viral RNA, and the machine can recognize those, and that gives you a positive test. So the answer is, at the moment we're testing for the RNA in the virus, we're testing for the antigen. Antibody tests are being developed, but this is still a major weakness in what we're doing, because even in my country this takes a working day to come back, and in many African countries they didn't have this test. So that's how we test for it. We're testing for the actual presence of the virus itself. That's all we can do at the moment, test for the presence of the virus. Soon we'll be able to test for the antibodies, so that should be hopefully a quicker, easier test. But at the moment we've got this real-time polymerase chain reaction, which is not a straightforward thing to do. Even in China they ran out of the kits, so it's not completely straightforward. Good, there we are. Right, let's have another, see if we find another question. I'll be interested to see if we go off again. I hope we don't. Right. 5 Keck is asking about the incubation period. Were we wrong? Now, the incubation period is typically 4, 5 or 6 days. That's the most common incubation period. But right at the start of this epidemic, people looked at it and they thought that 95% of people would become symptomatic within 12.5 days. So quarantine people are using 2 to 14 days. But there are individual cases that are much longer than this. So there's 2 cases in China, one of 19 days and one of 28 days, where it's documented that people were isolated and then tested positive. So what I would say is the vast majority of incubation periods are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. A few are 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 days. But a small minority, but we don't know how small that minority is, can be over 20 days, even up to 4 weeks, which is really quite an incredible variation in incubation period time. And what it makes me wonder is, it makes me wonder about the genetics of the virus, to be quite honest. I'm just telling you my thinking on this, see if it makes sense. So they think that the virus jumped from some animal. Not quite sure what that animal was, but the virus jumped from some animal like that into humans. And we think that only happened once. The geneticists think that happened once. So one person got infected from an animal. That may well have got infected from a bat. Nothing like that. So the virus went from a bat to an animal, from the animal into a human, and that probably only happened once. So that meant there was just one type of the virus in that human there. But then that human there infected 2 others. And then those 2 others would infect 2 more each. And then those 2 would affect 2 more each. Like that. And the disease spread. Now, as this went to more and more people, and we end up with lots and lots of people affected, then that means that the number of viral particles also increased. So now this disease is present all over the world. So the virus is present all over the world. And these viruses mutate really rapidly. So this single strand of RNA, the instructions in that, the bases in that change really quite rapidly. And this gives rise to different viruses, which we call serotypes, because of the tests that we use to detect them. Now, these serotypes can end up being a little bit different. So the serotype in Iran could be different from the serotype in my country or from the serotype in China. So there's different serotypes. So you can end up with lots of different types of the virus. Now I've forgotten what the original question was. But anyway, you can end up with lots of different types of the virus. And that can lead to perhaps somewhat different presentations of the disease. Oh yeah, incubation period. So it's quite conceivable that these different serotypes, as this spreads all round, each one here giving rise to 2, as we see. It's quite possible, I don't know, but it's quite possible that some of these different types of the virus, so this virus here is mutated in one direction, that's mutated in another direction. It's possible that these could mutate to have different incubation periods. So we could see slightly different presentations of the virus in different parts of the world, potentially with different incubation periods because the viruses keep mutating. But if we take as a rule of thumb that the incubation period is 2 to 14 days, with just the odd case going beyond that, That's probably roughly true, but of course it is concerning that the odd case go longer than that, because they're probably infectious during that phase. They're probably infectious, so that means they can be potentially spreading this to other people, because there was a paper I read just recently, and the thinking there was that this disease is actually most infectious about 3 or 4 days after initial infection. So you get infected, then 3 or 4 days later you're quite infectious, then you get the illness, and you might actually be more infectious during the incubation period, which is quite concerning, because the reason that the SARS-1 2002-2003 was contained was that people with that were sick and shed the virus at the same time. They didn't shed the virus in the incubation period. So you knew who was going to spread the virus because they were actively sick at the time. It was sick people that spread the virus. So this is quite different. So this variation in incubation period is concerning. It is concerning. Can I break down exactly what is entailed in a pandemic? Well, it's a good question. An epidemic is a large-scale localized outbreak. Now, quite how big localized is difficult to say, but it'd be reasonable to say in one country. So even though the outbreak in China affected a whole nation, virtually a continent-sized nation, affected many millions of people potentially, that would still be an epidemic. Technically, a pandemic is when a disease is on 2 or more continents. So technically, this is a pandemic because it is present in 2 or more continents. In Asia, it's in America, it's in Europe, it's in Australia, I think. Yeah, Australia. So, so it definitely qualifies as a pandemic. But what the World Health Organization are reserving that term for is when this virus is in different countries and it's spreading in different countries via community spread. So basically the answer to the question is you can define pandemic pretty well any way you would like. But the World Health Organization mean that it's spreading independently in different countries. And I think that is the stage we are at now. So the WHO has been behind the game quite a bit on this, to be fair. And it seems obvious to me now it's a pandemic because it's spreading in different countries. And I would expect in the next few days the WHO will declare that it is a pandemic. But they haven't done so yet. So technically at the moment it's not a pandemic, even although it is a pandemic. Pan just means the whole world, everywhere. That's what a pandemic is. What steps do medical personnel take? Well, we need to be taking all the steps we possibly can now is the answer. Yeah, thoughts on the incubation period can be up to 27 days. Yes, there are cases recorded of up to 28 days. Now, a question there about the antiviral drugs, remdesivir, for example. So remdesivir was developed for Ebola. Terrible infection, Ebola virus, and it was developed for that, and it does have some efficacy against Ebola. Now, whether it works or not against COVID-19, we don't know. So what people have been doing, if they don't know how to treat something, and there's no prescribed drugs, no drugs that are definitely indicated, and we don't know, then what we'll sometimes do is guess. So to me, it would be a good guess to give remdesivir in this infection, even though it's not licensed for that. We don't know if it's true. It's called compassionate prescribing. So I could give that drug, hoping it would work. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. You're just risking the side effects. But if it does work, you're doing some good. Now, the Chinese are doing big double-blind, randomised controlled trials on this at the moment. Good quality research is being done, and we will know the answer. So we are using remdesivir at the moment compassionately. in therapeutic settings, and we will know if it works soon, because the Chinese are doing studies on it now, and we should have the results of those studies in a couple of weeks. Concern for Italy and Iran. Yes, I agree. Italy and Iran are both spreading there. And there's been unrest in Iran. Yes, that's true. Okay. Now, this is a question I get asked a lot. What about the possibility of reinfection? Now, this is very complicated story. Now, what normally happens, I'm just going to give you, I won't go into this in too much detail, but what normally happens, as we've said, you have the virus, you make the antibodies, the antibodies kill the virus, the disease goes away. Cured. Then if you get the virus again, into your body again, then the antibodies are already there, and they will kill the virus as soon as it gets into the body, and you won't get the disease. You'll get what you call subclinical infection. It will be treated before you have time to be ill. So that's what normally happens. Now, there's something called so if you shouldn't get reinfected is the answer, but there is a phenomena called antibody what's it called, antibody assisted reinfection or something. So what happens is here, so what happens is, if you take dengue fever for example, so dengue fever, there's 4 types of the fever. There we go. There's 4 types of dengue, 4 types of virus. Now, if you get infected with one type of dengue, you become immune to that one type of dengue. But because there's 3 different types of dengue, you can be infected by the other 3 types. So the antibodies you make to dengue 1 do not protect you against dengue 3, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So you can get the other 3 types of dengue. And the problem is, if you get reinfected with a different type of dengue, you get the disease more severely. This is called antibody enhanced infection. You get the disease more severely. And it's a bit complicated. I'll just tell you briefly what's happening here. So antibodies are kind of molecules which are shaped like this. That's an antibody molecule. And what the antibody molecules do is they have particular receptors on their surface like that are particular shapes that bind onto the virus or the antigen like that. And that helps to kill it. Now, what happens with this, if there's reinfection and this antibody enhancement, if there's reinfection, what happens is you have some immune cells, say macrophages there like that, or a dendritic cell, one of the immune cells. And these have particular receptors called Fc receptors on their surface. Now, what can happen is that if you have antibodies to one type of virus like this, so there's the antibodies to one type of virus, and then you get another type of virus, then the antibody fits onto this other type of virus, like the second type of dengue. And then the combination of the antibody and the virus then fit onto the receptor, like this. But the trouble is with antibody enhanced immunity is that this combination is not enough to kill the virus, but it is enough to let the virus into the cell. So it take a long time to explain this properly, but let me just have another go. So what we're saying here is that if you have one form of dengue, you make antibodies to it, you won't get that form again, but that makes you more susceptible to infection from other forms of dengue. And it can actually kill your white cells that are protecting you from the dengue, making the infection worse. Now, because the COVID-19 virus is mutating all the time, what may happen is it may essentially evolve into different types of the virus. So one type of the virus here that's evolved somewhere might be so different from this original type of the virus that evolved last year that the immune system no longer recognises it fully, and it only partly recognises it. And when it partly recognises it, it will partly kill it, but it will actually allow it to get into white blood cells to cause further infection. Now, this may be one reason, one mechanism why some young medical people in China have died. It could be that they got different serotypes of the virus all at the same time, and that caused the. Are we back? We're back? Yeah. Are we back? Am I back? Someone tell me if I'm back. Am I back? It's back on, I think. Is it? Am I back on? I need to know. I think we might be back. Oh, I'm back. Okay. We're back. Okay. Now, what the heck is going on here? I don't know. My computer's never done this before. Anyway, so we're talking about reinfection. So it looks like reinfection is theoretically possible, but I don't think it's been clinically and epidemiologically demonstrated. I've only read about one case in China where someone was definitely reinfected, so we are waiting to see if that's possible. But if reinfection does occur, and we have this antibody-mediated enhancement, combined with rapid mutation of the virus, this could mean that this virus becomes endemic, and we could be stuck with it for decades, unfortunately. That is one possibility. I do hope it's not the case. I think, am I on? Am I on? I don't know if I'm on or not. Someone tell me if I'm on. Yeah, I'm on. Yeah, I'm back. Okay. Right. Let's take another question. Go back up to some of the earlier questions. Any questions? Yeah, someone's asking about the young doctors that died. I mean, it's terrible, isn't it? Some young doctors in China have died. Now, in the younger age group, what the Chinese did was they did a study of all the 72,000 cases they'd done up to a particular point a week or so back. And there is a death rate amongst younger people, so it does happen. Younger people can die, it's just less common. What I wonder is with these doctors is the difference that sleep deprivation made, because they wouldn't be getting much sleep. I wonder about the possibility they were infected with many viruses at the same time, or even if they had some concurrent infection, such as a bacterial infection at the same time, that made them more prone to getting severe disease. I'm not really quite sure, but it's certainly tragic. But a certain amount of younger people can die from this disease. Okay, let's take another question. What does happen in super spreaders' bodies? Paul asked that question. Well, super spreaders are people that spread the disease to a lot of people. So if the average R0 for this is 2.6, that means on average an individual will infect 2.6 other people on average. But of course, some people are going to be way above average and infect lots of people, and these people are called super spreaders. Now, the biological basis for this isn't really well understood. These people probably shed more of the virus, and they probably have lifestyle factors that make them spread more of the virus. It's not really quite clear. They could have an immune system which is just good enough to stop them getting sick, but not good enough to eradicate the virus. So the biological basis of super spreaders is not entirely clear, but they do spread a lot of the virus. They do shed a lot of virus. I think that's the key message. They spread a lot of the virus. Has it mutated in Italy and Iran to be more deadly? It's possible. Let's hope not. People are asking if I'm being censored. I really don't know. My computer's never packed in like this before. We've talked about antibody-dependent enhancement. We don't know if that is occurring yet or not. It may be. Am I reading the chat? Yes, I am. Just looking for another question. Question here about Pakistan. Pakistan has got a lot of daily flights still flying between Pakistan and China. You've got a lot of crowded people in small places in many areas in Pakistan. I do tend to think it is likely that the virus will spread to Pakistan. Yes. Is it there already? We simply don't know. It's not there officially at the moment, but it could be there. I think what I'll do is I'll just give you today's figures while I've got them here. Yeah, right. So here are some figures from today. Saturday the 22nd. Now, as we've said many times, this is the name of the virus. This is the name of the disease. And these are the figures for today. Now, the cases in China are going down, which of course is great. The cases are going down, but we've said that's probably for artificial reasons of control, and for the natural reason that the epidemic is naturally peaking. I'm always concerned about the number of severe cases because we can't treat them all at once. So they're kind of the figures that we've got at the moment. How useful these are, of course, is very limited. They might not be useful really at all. We know they're underestimates, of course. Someone asked what a sequelae. What are sequelae? Well, what you get with a disease is disease has a natural evolution. So you'll get the infection arrives in the body, then you'll get the incubation period, then you'll get the disease, then you'll get a recovery convalescent period. But sequelae are any pathological features that persist after you've recovered clinically from the disease. So, for example, before we were talking about myocarditis, which is a worry. So if someone was left with, say, heart damage after the infection had cleared, that would be a sequelae. Or if someone was left with fibrotic lung disease, physical damage to the lungs, that would be a sequelae. So a sequelae is any long-term problem that exists after the acute phase of the illness has passed. That is a sequelae. Now, there have been quite a few questions about methods of spread. So let's kind of go over the methods of spread. So, first of all, we know there's droplet infection, and this is where it's breathed out in droplets of water. So I had a diagram about this somewhere, which I can't find now. Never mind. So people breathe out biggish droplets of water. So when you breathe out wet, moist air, and these droplets of water can contain the virus. And this spreads over a relatively short distance of a couple of meters, typically. Person to person, it gets into the mucous membranes, the eyes, the nose and the mouth of the person known to be infected. But these droplets can also fall onto a surface containing the virus. Then someone touches these, gets them onto the hands, and that goes into the mucous membranes as well. So that's one way, but now we know this is also spread in the air. So one person might be here, and another person might be in the next room, like this. But because it's spread through the air currents, it could be spread in ventilation systems and could go from one person to the next. This is why it's probably spreading fairly quickly. But other ways it's spreading, we know it's spread in, so that's 1, 2, 3 feces. Now if you're in the States, you don't put the A in. It's spread in the stools. So someone defecates in a public toilet. Gone out of focus. Someone defecates in a public toilet. Am I going to focus up again? Don't seem to be focusing. We'll give it a minute. So someone defecates in a public toilet. They flush the toilet, and that causes aerosol to go out into the air around about the toilet. Virus particles then land on surfaces near the toilet. People touch that with their hands and can get it into their mouth. So that is another way. So feces is another way. Now, fourth way we have learnt today is urine. The virus is excreted in urine and is spread in urine. We have just learnt that it's spread in urine. Now, the implications here for spread, and I'm back in focus, is that someone passes urine, men especially passes urine into a urinal, and that will aerosolize out into the air. And again, it can go onto surfaces or can cause cross-infection from urine. And with regards to urine and feces spread, I've taken a few questions from sewage workers who are concerned about spread in sewage. I have no data on that, but I suspect it could spread in sewage, yes. That is what I would suspect. So we have these mechanisms of spread. Okay. Can the virus spread from one apartment to another by air? NIMQ. The answer to that question is that's exactly what seems to have happened on the Diamond Princess, when people got the infection even though they were confined to their cabins for most of the time. So can it spread in air? The Chinese officials have said yes, it can spread in the air. Have I seen that documented in a scientific paper? No, but the Chinese officials seem quite clear that it can spread in the air. So the answer to that does seem to be yes. Now, someone's asking about diabetes. Now, the thing about diabetes is in diabetes, the blood sugar goes high. So imagine this is one of the body's white cells, say a macrophage. And this is a group of viruses over here. Then what the macrophage do is it will move through the tissues, a process called amoeboid movement, and it will phagocytose. It will eat these viruses. Now the problem is, if there's a lot of sugar in the tissue fluids, these cells can't move properly. They can't migrate through the sugary environment. So that means the viruses don't get eaten, so they're quite happy. So with any infection, if the blood sugar is high, that's going to predispose to infection, and high blood sugar levels will inhibit the activity of the immune system. So high sugar levels can inhibit the efficiency of the immune system. Now, it's not the diabetes that someone's got the diabetes per se that's inhibiting their immune system. It's the high blood sugar levels that inhibit the immune system. So if the diabetes is well managed, then that should be okay. As long as their blood sugars are at a good level, they should be able to have an immune response the same as anyone else, as long as they manage the blood sugar. So the key there is good management of blood sugar level. So if you're diabetic, make sure your blood sugars are good, and you should be as protect your immune system should work as well as anyone's immune system who is not diabetic. Can you have COVID and flu at the same right? So someone's saying, can you have H1N1, which is an influenza virus, and COVID virus at the same time? And the answer is yes, you can. You can get concurrent infection with different organisms if you're exposed to them both. In fact, it's particularly important if people are ill, that we do protect them from additional infection. So another type of double infection that's particularly common is bacterial secondary infection. So what commonly happens? So the answer to the question about the viruses is yes. But what is more common is what happens is, imagine that's the lining of your that's the lining of the respiratory tract there. That's the lining of your respiratory tract. And on here we have these nice column-shaped cells like this, like that. They're called columnar epithelial cells, the respiratory epithelium. And it'd be the same on the other side. There'd be another set of cells facing this. So these are lining all your airways, all the way down from your larynx all the way down to your tiny airways, aligned with these columnar respiratory epithelial cells. So is a large part of the upper airway as well. And these are famous because they've got these cilia, these wafty hairs coming from their surface, several hundred cilia per cell, and these cilia are wafting. So the cilia go whew, 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 and they waft the mucus up where you can cough it out. So that's what's happening here. Now, when the virus gets into the cells, what happens is you get viral particles in these cells, like that. And the viral particles, because the viruses only work when they are inside the cell. Virus particles are obligate intracellular parasites. They only work inside the cell. And what they will do is they will produce more viral particles. They will hijack the cell's machinery, protein making machinery, put more viral particles out that will then infect the cell next door and the cell next door, so it will spread. But eventually the viruses will kill these cells. So that cell will be killed eventually, and that cell will be killed. So you get areas of dead cells. So instead of having nice lining like that with green, not with clear mucus over the surface, you have gaps. So you have a few cells there and a few dead ones there and a few cells there, because the virus is killing the cells. It's like a gappy teeth. And what happens is bacteria get into these gaps. So there's the cells, and then bacteria get into these gaps, and they reproduce there. There's a nice little lodge for them to sit in, and this is called bacterial secondary infection, and this is really common in viral infections. So very often when you read the reports of how people are treated with COVID-19, they are treated with antibiotics. Not because the antibiotics will kill the virus, of course they won't, but because the antibiotics will prevent and treat the bacterial secondary infection. So yes, you can get multiple infections all at the same time, unfortunately. All at the same time. This is a particular problem with HIV. I mean, in India, for example, saw quite a few people with HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, and tuberculosis. They had infections with both at the same time, and of course that causes really quite major problems, because you've got to treat both infections. So yes, you can be infected with multiple things at the same time, unfortunately. Okay, a question here about from Julie. How is the virus spreading in Thailand if it cannot survive in warm weather? Will Canadian summer kill it off? Excellent question. Now this is called seasonality. So for example, the influenza virus doesn't survive well in warm weather, so it's seasonal. So we see most cases of flu over winter time when we see most cases. Now this virus survives best at 5 degrees centigrade, probably. But at 20 degrees centigrade, it will probably still survive on surfaces for about a day. It won't survive in sunshine. It will be killed quickly in bright sunshine with the ultraviolet and the heat. But even at 40 degrees centigrade, it can probably survive on surfaces for a few hours. So the warm weather will reduce the spread somewhat, but it won't stop it. And the warm weather won't have too much effect on the droplet infection component or the air spread infection. So while it would be lovely if the cold weather, if the warm weather got rid of it, it doesn't seem to be the case. And as you've rightly said, it's spreading in Thailand, it's spreading in Singapore. So it appears this virus is not particularly seasonal. It can spread. It can spread even in warmer weather. Australia, of course, is very hot this time of year, but it could still spread in Australia. Anecdotal cases in various places. Okay, I've dealt with this one before. Is it a bioweapon? I don't think it is, because two reasons for thinking that. What one is, I don't think it's a bioweapon because the Chinese could make a much better bioweapon than this if they wanted to. But the main thing is people have done genetic, what they call phylogenetic analysis of the genetics of the virus and how it's related to other viruses, and it's very similar to a coronavirus found in bats. Very high degree of genetic similarity. So it's genetically very similar to viruses in bats. So it would be strange if a bacterial viral research laboratory deliberately designed a virus to be the same as one that's found naturally in bats. This is a natural virus from the environment that has somehow got into people, unfortunately. So I don't think it's a bioweapon. If the Chinese wanted to invent a bioweapon to kill us all, I'm sure they could. But the phylogenetics indicate that it's not, that it is related to other known coronaviruses. How would humidity affect it? That's a good question. So, different levels of humidity in different countries. The answer is with this virus we don't know, but the work that was done on SARS on this was a bit interesting, really. The virus survived well at low humidity, at 20% humidity. It did not survive well at 50% humidity, but it did survive well at higher humidities. So it seems that it doesn't mind low humidity or high humidity, but doesn't like average humidity. So the basic answer to that question is, if you live in a very humid country, that is not going to protect you, no. Humid countries like Thailand, for example, the virus will be able to survive and spread in that humid environment. Now, vaccine estimate. When will there be a vaccine for this disease? Now, different labs are working on different candidate antigen molecules to work as a virus. So this is being worked on by different places. But even when a possible vaccine comes up, it's got to be tested in human volunteers to make sure it's safe. Then it's got to undergo clinical trials to see if it works, because it could, I mean, a vaccine potentially could make things worse by producing antibodies that augmented viral entry into cells. So it has to be proved safe. And my personal estimate is, because everyone's going flat out on this, I suspect we probably will have a vaccine in about 18 months' time. I'd be very surprised if there's a vaccine in February 2021. I strongly suspect it's going to be summer 21. So the answer is the vaccine is not going to be made in time for this year's outbreak. We can basically forget about a vaccine for the current pandemic. It's going to come. It's going to come, but it's going to come late. Even the SARS coronavirus and the MERS coronavirus, that is the SARS-1 coronavirus, the 2002-2003 outbreak, and the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome virus. There's not even effective vaccines for those in humans, and they've been around for years. Right, some patients experience diarrhea, Kennedy says. You're absolutely correct, Kennedy, they do. Now, in animals, coronavirus actually mostly affects the gastrointestinal tract, where it causes diarrhea. That's where it mostly affects. In humans, it seems it does affect the urinary tract and the gastrointestinal tract, but most of the infection is from the lungs. But we do know that the diarrhea, if someone's got diarrhea as a result of this virus, would be infectious. So probably about 10-15% of patients get diarrhea, something of that order. The last study I read was about 10% of patients got some diarrhea. So they do, and in some patients it was the presenting sign. And in fact, there was a hospital-acquired infection spread in China, what the Americans still call nosocomial spread. because patients with abdominal symptoms and diarrhoea, well, if someone's got abdominal symptoms, we normally send them to the surgical ward because that's normally a surgical condition. So they went to a surgical ward. From the surgical ward, they spread the condition to other surgical patients, which was remarkably unfortunate. Now, Julie, UK hospitals fully prepared now. On the NHS website, National Health Service in my country, they said the NHS is fully prepared. It's fully prepared for coronavirus. So the NHS is saying we are fully prepared. So suppose we have 10,000 people with the disease. So that would be there. 10. Do that again. 10,000 people with the disease. Right. Now, 20% of those are going to get severe disease. So that's 2,000. 5% of those are going to get critical disease. So that's 5,000, isn't it? No, 500. Is that right? I think that's 500. Right. So in a town of, say, 100,000 people, 10,000 get the disease. 2,000 are probably going to need oxygen. In my hospital, typical district general hospital, we couldn't give 2,000 people oxygen at the same time. It's just haven't got the facility to do that. And if 5% of people are critical, that's 500 people needing intensive care. Well, we've got 9 intensive care beds. 9 CCU, ITU beds, intensive therapy unit beds. We've got 9. So if there's 500 people need those 9 beds all at the same time, or if there's 2,000 people need oxygen all at the same time, I do not see how we can possibly be fully prepared. There's no way we can do this. I mean, last year I was working on the local A&E department, and even we couldn't cope there sometimes with normal winter flu. But suppose it's not 10,000 people that get the disease. Suppose it's 100,000 in an area. If it's 100,000 in an area get the disease, then that means 20,000 are probably going to get severe disease, needing oxygen. Of those, 5,000 are probably going to be critical. Well, we've still only got 9 ITU beds. This is the problem. This is why it concerns me so much that so many of these cases can be severe. Now, for the 80%, for 80,000, they're going to feel probably pretty awful, some of them. Some won't feel too bad. They'll go to bed, and then the week after they'll get up and go back to work probably. But for the minority that get severe disease, it's just not possible that we could treat them all at the same time. So to say the NHS is fully prepared for that is, well, if it wasn't serious, it would be laughable. It really is disappointing that the health service is saying things like this, because we criticise the Chinese and we criticise the Iranians and the North Koreans for not being honest with us, but are we being honest? We cannot cope with 5,000 sick people all at the same time, and that is potentially what we're going to get. The Imperial College London modellers estimate that 60% of people could be affected within the first year, and of those 30% could be sick. Well, if 30% of people are sick over a year in my country, that's going to be like about 5 million people sick in a year. And if 20% of those are severe and 5% of those are critical, or work it out for yourself. My mental arithmetic's not up to it. But we are dealing with something really quite serious here. And then if we get different viral strains, different serotypes, and we start getting reinfection and this becomes endemic, this could be going on for some time. Now, I hope that's not the case. I don't want to be overly pessimistic. But the modelling does show that 60% of people could get this infection, and it's hard to see at the moment how it's going to be stopped. So it really is a problem that it's unclear how it's going to be addressed, because at the moment we're in the early stages of a pandemic. What is my personal opinion of colloidal silver? Right, okay. Now, I get asked these sort of questions a lot, and I'm not sure what colloidal silver is actually. I know what a colloid is. A colloid is a fluid with big molecules in it. Like the cytoplasm in a cell is a colloid, or we sometimes give intravenous colloids like plasma, which is water and plasma proteins and things like that. So that's a colloid. It's a solution with big molecules. And I know what silver is because silver kills everything. So silver kills viruses, bacteria. So does iodine. Iodine and silver kill viruses and bacteria. But I don't know what a silver colloid is. But I imagine if you had silver suspended in a colloid. So we have this actually. We have something called flamazine, silver sulfadiazine, which was a cream invented in the Vietnam War for treating burns. And it's got silver in it. It's very good for killing bacteria in wounds. But how you'll get that into your lungs, I hate to think. So I can't possibly see how you would get silver into your lungs to kill viruses and bacteria. I think I'm afraid that's a bit of a non-starter. So it'd be good for treating infections in wounds, but not good for treating infections in lungs. What if you have existing kidney problems, like 50% function? Well, the existing problems, these are called comorbidities. So we know that comorbidities for this are hypertension, diabetes, probably existing lung disease. If you've got 50% renal function, though, like you say, you're probably not doing too bad. The answer is I don't have any data to answer that question, but people with comorbidities and greater age are at more risk. So the older someone gets, the greater the risk is. But specifically for kidney problems, I don't think we have any data on that. But I think it would be less of a problem. This is only me thinking out loud. It would be less of a problem than lung disease or hypertension or diabetes. I would think. Yeah. So Kippers is asking about hypertension under control with medicines. Again, I don't have the data to answer that, but I strongly suspect that if someone's high blood pressure is under control, it would be less of a risk. And for diabetes, I'm pretty sure that it's less of a risk. So yes, long-term conditions certainly need to be well controlled. There's no ambiguity about that. They need to be well controlled. No more news out of Iran other than I talked about before, that the people in Iran are worried, and that it does seem to have that there are 6 cities in Iran that the Iranians are thinking about closing down. But the trouble is, in Iran at the moment there are the elections, so politically it's a bit inconvenient to have an infection. So the amount of infection control in Iran has not been as good as we would like to have seen. Lots of people have asked about insect spread. Is it spread by mosquitoes? And the answer is we simply don't know that. My guess would be that it isn't, but it is purely a guess. Does this virus have HIV? No, it's not the HIV virus, it's a different virus. I mean, they're both RNA viruses, but they are completely different viruses. Will it work to disinfect masks with alcohol? Oh, right, well, I mean, the virus can be cured by 70% alcohol, but I wouldn't have thought disinfecting a mask is a good idea. No, not particularly. Is it possible to get two viruses at the same time? Yes, it is. We've answered that one. It is possible to get two viruses at the same time. Someone's asking if SARS-1 has mutated. The answer to that question is no. This is not SARS-1 virus. This is a novel coronavirus. It's a new coronavirus that has spread by what we call spillover infection from animals. It is a zoonotic infection. So the zoonoses are infections that have spread from animals, and this is a new zoonotic infection. It is not a re-emergence of the old SARS-1 virus. Now, it's a bit annoying because the World Health Organization, which to me is unfortunate, but so SARS-1, 2002-2000 outbreak, 2002-2003, that was called SARS, Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, a coronavirus. So this was what caused the outbreak in 2002-03. Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, coronavirus. And now this new virus, they've called it SARS. So that was 2002, that one. Now this new one, they've called it SARS, coronavirus 2, which is very confusing because it's a completely different virus. So that virus there no longer exists in humans. It's finished. The epidemic was stopped in 2003. Brilliant. Got rid of that one. It's gone. It'll still be in animals, but we don't have it in humans anymore, which is wonderful. but this one we do. But this virus is novel. It's a new virus. And because it's novel, it means our immune systems have never seen it before. So we will have no natural immunity to this. So normally what happens if you get a virus like a cold or even a flu, you get a new virus, then you've got antibodies that are a bit similar to it. So you've got antibodies that kind of, your antibodies maybe are like that. These antibodies that fight the infection. And this won't quite fit in, but it doesn't completely not fit in. The antibodies can adapt to make it fit relatively quickly, and they will change the shape of this end, make new antibodies so it does fit. So it starts to fit. So as long as you've been exposed to a similar virus before, you can adapt to it more quickly. You've got what's called cross immunity. You'll have some cross immunity. But with a completely novel virus like that, you're starting from scratch. So this is the problem. It's a novel coronavirus. It is not a reincarnation of SARS-1. So the answer to that question is no, it's not the same virus as SARS-1. But it is a coronavirus, and it does cause similar clinical features, in fact very similar clinical features, which is perhaps why they called it a SARS virus, because it causes similar clinical features. Right. Am I still here? I know I'm talking to quite a few people, but you kind of feel like you're talking to yourself. It's very strange. Right. Can it spread by the wind or rain? The wind possibly, the rain no. the rain would tend to wash it down onto the streets. But it is interesting, in South Korea and China, you do see people disinfecting the streets quite a lot. People disinfecting the streets, so they are clearly worried about it being on surfaces like that. Now, people talk a lot about masks. I found one in my garage, actually. So if people are going to wear masks, then you have to make sure that they're fitted round the nose and not leaking round the side here. So this one's actually quite good because it's fitting in round quite tightly. I'm not sure, I'm not that familiar with these masks. I've only ever used surgical masks in the past. But the thing is with these masks is it's forming quite a good seal, but I already feel quite sort of claustrophobic in this. Now, if there is viruses in the air, let's imagine there's lots of viruses in the air, and the viruses are getting onto that mask there, and this is screening them out. Let's assume it's screening them out. Then what that means is after I've been in an infected area, I'll have lots of viruses on here. So if I come and take this mask off like this, can you see now the virus is on my hand? So what you have to try and do is take it off so that like that, and then just put it in the bin so you're not touching that middle bit. But now this mask here is designed for working. I've got it for doing dusty jobs in the garage. This is a particular one. But the surgical masks that we wear in theatre, we use those to keep infection from me getting into the patient, not to protect me. So masks really are of limited value outside of a clinical environment. They're of some value, but limited value. Having said that, everyone's using them. In fact, interestingly, I was just talking to a friend in Australia, and in Australia, he lives in Perth and all over Australia. In fact, in other countries, people have bought all the masks and all the hand sanitizers and were selling it to China. Appalling profiteering. People would seek to make money out of this is appalling. But that's what they were doing. They were buying up all the masks and all the hand gels and selling it to people in China. But the Chinese authorities have now banned that. And the Chinese authorities have said if anyone sends masks or hand gel, we're going to confiscate it and give it out to people that need it, so it won't get through. So now all of a sudden, you've got lots of people with stockpiled masks who can't get rid of them because they can't sell them in China. They can't send them to China, so it serves them right. No sympathy for them at all. Now, people are asking about what goes wrong when you get this disease. So we have looked at this on previous videos, but what is actually happening? What is happening is we know about these terminal bronchioles and the respiratory bronchioles and the alveolar air sacs. And the problem is two things. You can get ARDS, which is acute respiratory distress syndrome, acute respiratory distress syndrome. Now let's see what this means. Acute means it's of recent onset, so this is not a chronic disease. It's to do with the respiratory system. The person becomes distressed and it causes a syndrome, and a syndrome is a group of clinical features. So that's one possibility. The ARDS complicates this. Now in ARDS there's inflammation around here. There's inflammation in the small airways and inflammation in the alveoli. And like if you have an inflamed ankle, your ankle becomes swollen because of inflammatory fluid. The same thing happens. Inflammatory fluid collects in here, like that. And this is what you call infiltrates. The lung is infiltrated with inflammatory fluid. Well, if you have viral particles in here, that can cause pneumonia. Pneumonia. And pneumonia is infection at the level of the alveoli. So again, you get fluid accumulating in there. So either way, you get these infiltrates in the lung. That's what's happening. And of course, that means the oxygen can't get out into the blood, and the carbon dioxide can't get from the blood back in. That's what happens. So that means the amount of oxygen in the blood is going to drop, and that causes hypoxemia. And hypoxemia is reduced amounts of oxygen in the blood, and that causes hypoxia, which is lack of oxygen in the tissues. And lack of oxygen in the tissues will cause tissue damage and eventually death. So what is very useful to have, what we use a lot at work, are these little things. These are oxygen saturation probes. Can I go in? Yeah. So here we are. Not very well focused. So this is my oxygen saturation probe. In fact, I'm lucky, I've got two. So what we see here, now these little devices are only about £20, but what we see here is my oxygen saturations are 98%. Now clinically we like those to be above 90. We like them to be above 90, otherwise we'd give oxygen. In fact, we like it in healthy people to be 94 to 98%. So we see that my oxygen saturations are currently 99%, which is brilliant. So that's good. Can't get better than 100%, so that's pretty good. And we see that my pulse rate is 71 beats per minute. And we see that that red line is the pulse going through my finger. So this is sending laser lights through and it's detecting the amount of oxygen in my blood. Now if I had ARDS or I had pneumonia, this would go down and I would be hypoxemic and develop hypoxia, deficiency of oxygen in the level of my tissues. So from this we can conclude I haven't got pneumonia, I haven't got advanced respiratory distress syndrome. I've just had a cold I can't get rid of for about the last month. But it's not down here in my lower airways, it's just in the upper airways. So I've got another one here. This one. See what that one says. Heart rate 69, oxygen saturation is 98. So we'll accept that. Yep, heart rate 68, oxygen saturation's 99. So that's absolutely fine. So we test it with these pulse oximeters, remarkably useful little devices. They're actually quite cheap now. They only cost about £20 each. Probably get them for $20, $30 in the States. So remarkably useful little devices. We use that to test the oxygen levels. So when someone starts getting this disease, normally to begin with, when they first start getting it, they'll have some symptoms. They won't feel well, but they don't normally have the breathing difficulties. That normally develops in the second week. So the first week they'll have a dry cough, not a productive cough, and then only in the second week will they start getting these complications typically. And of course the other thing it's quite useful to have is a thermometer. Again, these are readily available. Now for years we used things like this. Mercury, is that focusing? Mercury type thermometers. And they're fine, but these days we tend to go on electronic ones. So you can just take my temperature on my forehead there. .6. Now that's actually quite warm. Your temperature can go up a little bit at the end of the day. So I'm going to test that in my ear. I don't think I've got a temperature, but we'll see. Well, that says 36.7, so the ears are much more accurate. Just so you sometimes got to fiddle around with these to get an accurate reading. So that is my temperature, 36.7, as is in my ear, which is normal. So at the start of this disease, you can get a fever. What am I now? Turned it off. So to have a thermometer at home is a remarkably useful thing to have. So, yeah, 36.7, that's now accurate. You would expect it to be a bit higher in your ear than on your forehead. So I think what happened there, they had the thermometer by the window and it was a cold place and it takes time to equivalate, or that's not the correct word, but become equal. So well worth having a thermometer at home of some sort so you can take your temperature. And there's no reason why you shouldn't have one of these either. I just think they're interesting things anyway. I'm always playing with mine. They're interesting devices. Right, let's get back to the questions. Okay, question here about vitamin C. Now, an American scientist called Linus Pauling, who won a Nobel Prize, said that vitamin C basically protects you against everything, but it's not true. Now, it is true that if you take large amounts of vitamin C, that can actually shorten some viral infections. There is some evidence that it can shorten the duration of coryzal features if you have a common cold, for example. So the answer is that vitamin C can give you some shortening of symptoms in a cold, according to some research. But taking high doses of vitamin C are not going to be helpful. So a few hundred milligrams of vitamin C a day extra is acceptable, but taking silly mega doses of vitamin C, like grams and grams of vitamin C, is actually potentially dangerous. It can clog up your kidneys, actually, so it's not a good thing to do. Now, what I would say about nutrition in generally, if someone is malnourished, like if you're short of vitamin C, or you're short of protein, or you're short of a nutrient, then that will predispose you to infection. But taking extra amounts of a nutrient, more than you need, is not going to give you enhanced protection in the vast majority of cases. So if you're short of vitamin C, I would say yes, that is a problem, take some extra vitamin C. If you've got normal levels of vitamin C, it's not going to help you much. So if you want to take 100 milligrams of extra vitamin C a day or so, that's okay, but taking large doses, I would think it's not a good idea. The only vitamin that we can be short of, especially in northern latitudes, is vitamin D. So when I remember, I take 25 micrograms of vitamin D, because vitamin D you mostly make from the sun on your skin. And if you've got dark coloured skin, you're going to make even less vitamin D if you've got dark coloured skin. So something to certainly bear in mind if you live in a northern winter, as I do at the moment. And especially so if you have darker coloured skin than me, because you'll be making even less vitamin D. So well worth thinking about the vitamin D. What time is it? Nearly 9 o'clock. So let's we'll take a couple more questions, then we'll probably leave it today. Are there any other viral infections that are contagious, as contagious as COVID? Yes, certainly. Measles, for example, is more contagious. Some viral infections are very contagious. Others are harder to catch. So it's not unusual. It's not unusual. So is vitamin D winter related? Yes, absolutely. Bert asked that question. We are not. I live in the north of England, and basically today there's been no sun at all, and I haven't been out that much either. Well, I've made no vitamin D whatsoever today, basically. So now vitamin D is fat soluble, but you can probably only store enough for about 6 weeks. So vitamin D is worth considering as a supplement. My National Institute for Clinical Excellence recommends up to 25 micrograms a day. So go by your local recommendations on that. But I think that's the only supplement I take personally. If you're malnourished, take supplements. If you're not malnourished, excessive vitamins will not give you extra protection, I don't think. Will the Olympics in Japan be cancelled? Well, basically, yeah. Okay, let's try and look at that question. The epidemic is peaking just now in Wuhan and Hubei. The epidemic will probably be peaking in China in another month or so. The epidemic will become more widespread, I believe, in Western countries in the next few weeks to the next month, and will peak in Western countries in 3-4 months after that. And that is going to be summertime when the Olympics are going to be on, so it may not be a good time to be travelling. Whether the Olympics will be on or not, I have no idea, obviously, but they may not be on. Is smoking impacting on this? Some data does show that smokers get more severe disease. And the other factor that people have asked me about quite a lot is the incidence of severe disease in, not severe disease, in incidence of air pollution in China. So is that a factor? And the answer is probably yes, it is. So air pollution and smoking certainly aren't going to help. And they can damage the lungs, and we know that lung damage is going to predispose to infection with this virus and potentially more severe infection. And there is a slight preponderance of men over women in China getting severe disease, so that could be related to the fact that men in China do smoke. The rates of men smoking in China is almost half. It's horrendous. Whereas women smoking in China are fairly uncommon. Why is New Zealand virus free? Because you're an island. Does it mean you're immune to the virus? No. If the virus gets there, you will catch it the same as the rest of us. Here's a good question. Amanda, can the virus cause seizures? Now, we did see some videos in the early days on the internet of people apparently fitting, but I'm satisfied that they are bogus. Now, if children get high temperatures, they can fit. But I've never seen anyone fit. I've never seen an adult fit with a high temperature, and I've seen adults with very high temperatures, 40, 41 degrees centigrade, and I haven't seen them fitting. So I don't think that the fever with this virus seems to be about 39 degrees centigrade. So no, that wouldn't cause fitting. Is there something intrinsic to this virus which would make someone fit? That would be if the virus affected the brain, like encephalitis. And I've never heard anything of that, no. So as I understand now, this virus is not going to cause fitting, no. Unless there's evidence to the contrary, but I know of no evidence that the virus will cause fitting. So I think the answer to that question is not as far as we know, and I don't see why it should. What is my estimate of how many people will be infected in the UK? In the first year of the epidemic in the UK, probably 60% of people in the country will be exposed to the virus, and perhaps 30% of those will become sick over the course of the year, is a possible projection from experience with previous epidemics. I hope that's a gross overestimate, but I fear it won't be. Oxygen supplements. Well, yeah, oxygen supplements are going to be needed. Some people do have oxygen concentrators at home if they've got COPD. So yeah, that would be a good idea. But I'm not sure it's viable to get one in the relatively short term. All unnecessary travel. Yes, we should be travelling less. Now, the World Health Organization have said we can travel normally, even to China. but what we've seen is international spread over the past week or two. Now, I think we could say if there'd been no international travel, there would be no cases in Australia, no cases in America, because there's oceans in the way. So this has been spread by international air travel. I think that's a pretty short debate, really. Yes, travel is spreading it. There's no question about it. Any advice for immunocompromised people? For example, multiple sclerosis. Well, in multiple sclerosis, the immune system is not compromised as such. But if you are disabled in that you can't move around normally, then yes, that will predispose you to infections. People that are immobile are predisposed to infections. So what advice would I give? Well, if a lot of virus comes to the area, then basically the advice would be the same as for anyone else. It's to try and avoid getting the virus. So how can we do that? Well, first of all, we want to avoid social contacts. So go home, close the door, and don't let anyone in, if that's at all possible. If you have to go out to work, then go out to work and come home and make sure you wash your hands meticulously. Do wear a mask if you feel that's going to help you. If you're around infected people, that could potentially help you to some extent. Meticulous hand hygiene, meticulous hygiene with the toilet. To tell you the truth, if there's a lot of virus around, I would avoid public toilets. If you do use a public toilet, don't touch anything in there and wash your hands afterwards. And when you've washed your hands, what I would do is carry some, this is just a bit of loo roll here, but I would carry some tissues. So rather than you can use these blow dryers, but the big advantage of a tissue is if you're carrying a tissue with you, then you can dry your hands on the tissue. And then if you suppose this is the handle of the toilet door there, I know it's my mug, but then you could open the toilet door like this, so you're not, with the inside of the tissue, so you're not touching. So if you hold the tissue in your hand like that and grab the door like that, then you're not touching the dirty handle of the door. Then you can open the door. Then when you've opened the door, you can let go and just crumple that up and keep it closed. So just think about protecting yourself from infection, because the infection is going to be on the surfaces in toilets because of this aerosolization effect from feces and from urine potentially. So isolate yourself from people. No hugging, no kissing for a period of time. I know it's all great fun, but for a period of time we need to not do that. We need to avoid shaking hands if there's a lot of the virus around. We need to be isolated, basically asocial. Not share our phones. Basically don't do the things that make us nice, friendly people for a period of time. In China, people are staying in their homes and they're getting food delivered. So if you're immunocompromised, certainly you need to take additional measures to isolate yourself for a period of time until we know more about what is going on. Make sure you get plenty of sleep. Sleep boosts the immune system. Good nutrition boosts the immune system. But the main thing is to avoid contact with the virus by avoiding other people. I think that is the main advice I can give you. Okay. No, I'm not sick. I've just had a cold for a month. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. Time frame for the vaccine we've said is about 18 months. Why is Portugal virus free? Either because it hasn't got there yet or because the cases aren't being reported. Can the virus affect the brain? The answer to that is not directly as far as we know. It can't affect the brain directly as far as we know. I'm just going to get a drink of water. Yeah, can the virus affect the brain? As far as we know, not directly. It doesn't cause encephalitis as far as we know. But the problem is, if we get hypoxia, then hypoxia will certainly damage the brain. So if we get this ARDS or pneumonia, like this, there's not enough oxygen, there's hypoxemia, there's hypoxia. Then the first organ to be damaged by hypoxia is the brain. So yes, it can damage the brain, but via the mechanism of hypoxia, not via direct attack on the brain. Is second time infection possible with COVID-19? There are one or two cases is the answer. We did look at this before when we talked about antibody mediated enhancement. So is it possible to be reinfected? Normally it's not with most viruses, but with this one there has been one or two cases, and it may be if it mutates. I think that's the key thing, if it mutates. Right, what do you know of chloroquine? Lost the question. What do I know of chloroquine phosphate? Well, chloroquine is an old drug used for malaria. Chloroquine is used for malaria. And there is some suggestions that chloroquine will help people infected with the COVID-19 virus. So chloroquine may turn out to be useful. I really hope it is, because it's off license and it's dirt cheap. We can have any amount that we want. So I really hope it is. And the Chinese are doing trials in that with that drug now. So we'll know if chloroquine's effective in about 2 weeks' time is the answer. I don't think it'll be curative, but it might help a bit, is the answer. And would I be quite happy using it for compassionate prescribing now? Yes, I would be. Some people are saying that chloroquine's been found to be effective, but it's not published yet. Can the virus live on clothes? Yes, I think it probably can, because it can live on surfaces. How to clean clothes? Normal washing would kill the virus and wash it out is the answer to that. What about proper cleaning of exposed fruit and vegetables? Now, cooking will kill the virus. But if there was an apple lying on the surface and someone like coughed on that apple or breathed out on that apple who was infectious, then yes, the virus could be on the food. So virus can be spread via food after cooking or by raw food, yes. So the answer is yes, the virus could be spread on the surface of an apple. Yes, it could. If someone infectious had coughed on it or sneezed on it or exhaled onto it or touched it with hands that were contaminated. So yes, it could. So the answer here is good hygiene in the home. So when you get in, wash your hands. If you brought fruit from outside, then wash it under the tap. Running soap and water will get rid of it. Just make sure you wash all the soap off before you eat it. So the answer is yes, and the remedy is good hygiene. That is the remedy to that. Right, Tracy asks, will the pneumonia vaccine help? Will the pneumonia vaccine help? Now, there are There are vaccines to different types of pneumonia. Pneumococcus and Haemophilus are both bacteria which cause pneumonia. And if you have Haemophilus vaccine, you will make antibodies to Haemophilus. But the thing about these antibodies that you make is they are completely specific to the particular organism that you are vaccinated against. So Haemophilus vaccine will not have any effect against COVID-19 virus at all. Absolutely none, absolutely zero. So the answer to the question, will pneumonia vaccine protect against pneumonia caused by COVID-19? The answer is a clear no. It will have no protective effect whatsoever. Right, good question here. Do you think HIV medications will be useful to avoid white cell damage in the event of secondary infection? That is a very good question. And again, the answer is HIV medicines are being tested in China as we speak. But Chuckle Monkey asked that question, do you think HIV medicines will be useful in avoiding white cell damage? That's a very perceptive question. I think it's possible, but the answer is I don't know, because the results of the clinical trials are not yet out. We should know that soon. In 2 or 3 weeks, when some early Chinese trial data comes out. Can kids be super spreaders? Now, children seem to get this infection less commonly than adults below the age of about 12, which is very good news. And children seem to get less severe disease than adults, which is also very good news. But children do get the virus, and they will have the virus in their mucous membranes, and they will breathe it out. So could children be super spreaders? Yes, absolutely. Because children can get it, it's just that they tend not to get the disease as severely. In fact, they're going to be more likely to be super spreaders because they'll have the disease, but they won't feel, most of the children won't feel very ill. So children will have the disease but not feel ill, so they'll still want to go around to the mates to play, where they can spread it to their mates and their mates' parents. So are children good candidates to be super spreaders? Yes, they are. Because they don't get it too bad themselves, but they will still be infected. Some cough medicines will help you cough up mucus from the lungs. Would that be useful with pneumonia? Kennedy asks. So the question is, some cough medicines will help you cough up mucus from the lungs. Would that be useful with pneumonia? The answer to your question, Kennedy, is no, because cough medicines don't help you cough up mucus from their lungs. It's a myth. They're actually useless. To get infection up from your lungs, you need to inhale steam. Warm steam is a good way to do it. And physiotherapists do chest physiotherapy to bring mucus up. There isn't any medicines which act as expectorants. It's actually not true. They don't work. So cough medicines will not help with pneumonia. The answer is no, they won't help. Cough medicines are basically a waste of money. Do you think whiskey and honey remedy would help against the virus? It's worth a try. Of course it won't. It will have no effect whatsoever. Well, having said that, honey is a natural ingredient. It contains flavonoids, like flavonoids that you get in plants, and they're very good for you anyway. Whiskey also contains flavonoids, but it also contains alcohol, which is quite toxic. So I wouldn't recommend that. Nebulizers. nebulizers are good. The type of nebulizers we use a lot on A&E is we use salbutamol and diprotropium bromide, and they're both bronchodilators. They dilate the bronchial passages. So nebulizers would be good if someone has asthma. Now, could a nebulized drug be efficacious? Yes, it could. It's conceivable that you could develop a drug which was inhaled and went to kill the virus directly. But as of now, I haven't heard of any drug which is nebulized that would be useful. But again, the Chinese may be doing trials on that, I don't know. So nebulizers we've got at the moment are good for treating asthma. Any nebulized antiviral drugs at the moment don't exist. Question: can this virus cause cytokine storm? The answer to that. Go that question again. Peter asks: Can this virus cause cytokine storm? Yes, is the answer, because it can cause sepsis. So, cytokine storm is what it is. You have your white blood cells here, and they detect an infection. So what they do is they release cytokines. And these cytokines go to other parts of the body to help us fight the infection. So, for example, they make you feel ill, which makes us rest, so that's good. They go to the hypothalamus to cause a fever. So that's good. Fever is going to help us kill the virus, improve the efficiency of the immune system. The cytokines do other things as well. And basically what the lot of cytokines will cause SIRS. Systemic inflammatory response syndrome. So localized inflammation makes your skin go red if you bash it. But now you can get like an inflammation all over the body with this SIRS. And that is what a cytokine storm is, and that will give us the features of sepsis. So the features of sepsis are fast heart rate, fast breathing rate, high body temperature, high white blood cell count, high blood sugar, and high lactate. High lactate in the blood. Now, this will give rise to these features of sepsis, or systemic inflammatory response syndrome. And viruses can cause sepsis, just the same as bacteria can cause sepsis. Maybe less common, but they can. And there are accounts of people getting sepsis with COVID-19 virus and dying from that sepsis. But what they're actually dying from is the systemic inflammatory response syndrome presenting as sepsis, and that is caused by what is called a cytokine storm. Lots of cytokines all being released at the same time, causing these features. So the answer to that question is yes. Hopefully it's very rare. It's a rare complication, but it can happen, yes. Well, there's still a few thousand people here, so we'll give it another few minutes. If this is popular, we can do another one. If you think me answering random questions is helpful, I'm happy to do it again. How long is it going to take for the virus to hit Europe? How long have we got to prepare? Well, I would expect community spread to be occurring in Europe within, you can't put times on this, 3, 4, 5 or 6 weeks. I would expect there to be community spread in Europe. I'm afraid that is going to happen. And then the virus is probably going to peak in summertime. So my bet would be within a month we're going to see person-to-person spread in Europe. That's a guess. Don't quote me on that. It's a guess. Hope I'm wrong. I hope it goes away. It never comes. But Yeah, I think it's going to be here in a few weeks. Here's a really good question from Crazy Flannel. Terrible name, but it's a good question. Does paracetamol weaken the immune system? Now, if you're watching in the States, paracetamol is acetaminophen. And what these drugs do is they are antipyretics. So if you have a fever, paracetamol will bring it back down to normal. Aspirin and ibuprofen will do the same thing. Will bring fevers back down to normal. Now, if you have a fever, you feel ill. So if I come and give you a gram of paracetamol and you start feeling better, you think, oh, he's clever, he's made me feel better in half an hour, which I have. But all I've done is given you antipyretic to bring your temperature back down to a normal level by giving you the paracetamol to put your temperature down, because it affects the hypothalamus in the brain directly. But the point is, your hypothalamus have put your temperature up deliberately. This is not a mistake. The cytokines have been released. They had a pyrogenic effect, and they affected the hypothalamus to turn the temperature up, because the immune system works best at febrile temperatures, and the virus doesn't like febrile temperatures either because it's too hot for it. So does paracetamol weaken the immune system? In my view, the answer is absolutely yes, it does. Yes, it does. Okay, I think we're going to wind this up now. We've been going on and off for well over 2 hours. So this seems to have been quite popular, though. So I will do another one of these. Apart from 2 technical errors, I've been answering questions for 2.5 hours now, but there's plenty more, so we will do another session. I'll flag up when I'm going to do another live session. If it works, that's absolutely brilliant. Final question there about pregnancy. This is the last question I'm answering tonight about pregnancy. Now, with MERS and SARS, there are adverse effects in pregnancy, both on the fetus and on the mother. But the studies we have so far on COVID-19 show that they are not adverse effects on pregnancy, as far as we know. But having said that, if you're pregnant, you certainly don't want to be getting infections. So I would take extra measures to isolate yourself as far as you possibly can if you're pregnant, and meticulous with personal hygiene. But it doesn't seem to cause the abnormal effects in pregnancy that we have associated with other viruses. Having said that, we don't have data for early pregnancy with the COVID-19 virus. Okay, I'm going to wish you good night now. God bless you all. I'm going to do another one of these quite soon because it seems to be quite popular. But 2.5 hours is quite enough for one session, so I will see you soon. Good night. Thank you for tuning in.